Live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Neal Adams. It's an honor. I've met Neal over the years. He is one of my heroes. I grew up on his books. I will give a couple of quick stories in a little bit. But this is a man who was a trailblazer in the industry, who not only helped rescue the industry, helped recreate and redefine characters like the Joker, gave the Batman more mythos than almost anyone else since probably the Jerry Robinson and other artists that came after Bill Finger and Bob Kane. He brought life to characters like Deadman. I mean, just an amazing creator. His Green Lantern, Green Arrow run is probably in my top 5 favorite series of all time. That's the one that I've got a cool story about, or at least I think it's cool. Whether or not anybody else does, I don't know. And this is a man who has an advertising company, who has worked in Hollywood, who continues to work in comics, who just shows no sign of slowing down. So the one, the only, Neal Adams.
Hey guys, how you doing? It's nice to see you. It's nice to hear from you. It's nice to see you guys out there. I hope that you enjoy this interview, and let's get started.
Awesome. So Neal, let's talk about today. I jump around in my interviews. I have no linear thought, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I've watched some of your shows. You are one of the first creators that decided if you can't be at comic conventions, you're going to stay in touch with your fan base by doing Facebook live shows. And having watched some of them, I find it incredible the relationship you and your family and your staff have with the audience. You are not a hard sell person. You're very blunt. You're very direct. You say it like it is. You explain all the artwork, and just the interaction you have is incredible. Why do you? The oddest way of saying this. Why do you think you jumped on this before most other creators? Why do you think you saw this opportunity?
Money.
And there you go, bluntness.
We can all pretend that we're in this for the art. We can all pretend that we're in this for some esoteric BS that we can talk back and forth. But when you sit down and you have a cup of coffee and you're talking to friends, you're trying to talk about how you're going to be able to increase your income, how you're going to help the business, how things are going to get better, how comic book stores are going to survive. What's happening at DC, of course, it's chaos over there. What's happening over at Marvel and what's going on with Disney relative to Marvel. We talk about everything. And so I'm in the midst of it all the time, even though to a certain extent, I kind of stay away from the friction and all the other stuff. I really like to be part of the advance of our craft because it actually makes money for us. So what we do is 2 or 3 times a week, like today, for example, we're going to have a sale and an auction of stuff. Like, for example, I've been doing advertising work for 40 years. So if you go to the front of our studio, there's these white cabinets that are about 35 feet long. And they're white because they're Formica, right? They're covered with Formica, so it's white walls and white cabinets. So you look at it and you go, oh, okay, that's where they keep the paper for the Xerox machine. But if you open up one of those cabinets, you'll find envelopes that are stacked. There's two shelves on one like this, and then each layer is an envelope, and each envelope is a job that we did for one advertising agency, or let's say a comic book company, or let's say a promotion agency, or an amusement park ride, or for a show that I was working on. And so we had these envelopes filled with stuff. And I've been looking at this stuff for years and saying, what am I going to do with all this stuff? I mean, there's a lot of really great artwork, but I have no venue to sell it because most of the people I see are comic book people. So that I'll go to conventions and I'll do sketches and we'll sell books and stuff like that. Because I have very nice relationships with DC and Marvel periodically. Every once in a while it gets a little frayed, but basically good. So what am I going to do with all this stuff? So when things started to cool off and we started to go back to conventions and this COVID thing started, even before COVID started, we thought, why don't we take that stuff down from the shelves and mount it and set it up and have auctions and sales and see whether or not there are other comic book fans or other fans that are interested in other work that I do for 50% of my time or more. I mean, people think that I do comic books all the time. I don't. I don't think I could have raised a family with 5 kids and grandkids and have a studio in the center of New York by just doing comic books. Because when I first kind of stepped away from comic books, for example, the last job I did for DC for many years was Superman versus Muhammad Ali. Well, I was paid $55 a page for that. $55 a page. You can't make a living doing that. But I can go to an advertising agency and I can draw a little frame, a little storyboard frame, about 3.5 by 4 inches around, and color with magic markers and make $200. Why would I do comic books if I can do that at an advertising agency? So we sort of split our time. So now we have what you would call the detritus, what's left over. So what am I going to do with this stuff? Well, you know what? It turns out there are people interested in that stuff, whether it's comic book or comic book related or advertising or whatever. We actually sell to fans as much stuff from the advertising work, because a lot of it as advertising promotion does involve comics, as we sell, let's say, like sketches, like I'll do these $300 sketches,
Right.
So we do as much advertising stuff. So now I'm not only able to continue making a living during COVID, make sure everybody at my studio is employed, whether it's at our comic book store in LA or in New York. Everybody in my family is taken care of. Everybody has an apartment or a house. Everybody's doing well. And most of it is from selling artwork that we've done over the last 40 years from those shelves that we pull the stuff down from. So that's a very good piece of business. You would have to say, Nick, I think you would be the first one to say, well, that's a good way to take a chunk of what you're doing and turn it into money, because that's exactly what we're doing. So the advantage of that to me is now I have an open mic to talk to people, to talk to comic book fans, to talk to people who would come to conventions, otherwise come to conventions. And part of what happens then is I then inspire other people, other artists and writers and people to come on the internet and to have little shows and little, websites and stuff, and to sell artwork, to do a similar thing to what I'm doing, so that they can make it through COVID and still have a normal life, still work for DC and Marvel, or maybe they do sketches for people or whatever. So it adds another area to what we do. So when we come out of COVID, I would bet dollars to donuts that this is going to be a standard part of our industry. It is not going to let's stop going on the internet and doing these little broadcasts. We are going to keep on doing it. And now we've got another function that our industry does.
Well, I will say this. I think that, first of all, I think, yes, we do this for money because we all want to feed our families.
Yes,
But
that's what it's
the,
about. And if you
but
can have a good time while you're doing it, who's to say no?
Well, what I was going to add to that was the passion you put in the work is why people care. It may be about us all taking care of our families, which is first and foremost, but the fact that you're not jaded, the fact that you treat every fan equally. I've seen you at shows, I've come to your booth. I find it amazing and encouraging no matter what show you're at. Even if you're there at a show one at that area, whether it's the same show or a similar show, once, twice, three times a year, your line is one of the longest lines. You have a great setup. And like I said, I've actually come there and bought books from you. I've actually come to your booth and bought Green Lantern, Green Arrow collections and given it to my friends like Frank Thierry. He had never read it. And I said, this is a series you need to read. And you treat everyone so well, like they are your friend when they come, because what I can see is that you appreciate the fact that you have fans that come to you because they love your work, and they're supporting you financially. You don't sit there and say, oh, you paid my person, here's my signature, have a good day. You sit there, you talk, you engage, you make everybody feel special about buying from you.
Nick, that's because I come from the neighborhood. I mean, it's not, it's really nothing to me to do that, because I would feel uncomfortable if we did it another way. Every once in a while, you meet somebody, gets his nose in the air about, like he's famous or whatever the hell it is. But, very quickly the fans bring him down and really let him know where things are. And also fellow artists and writers, you nudge somebody and you say, come on, try to get your, nose out of the air and give somebody a hug. We've been teaching that to the actors too. At conventions I go around and because I get along pretty much with everybody, I get along with the actors a lot. Okay, I've been involved with actors because with some of the advertising stuff we work with actors. So I can go to a convention, and let's say you got an actor who's just starting to do this. Maybe he hasn't been seen for 15 years, like the guy who played, what's his name? He-Man. Marilyn? What's his name?
Dolph Lundgren. Is it Dolph Lundgren?
Right. Now, but I'm not talking about Dolph Lundgren. I guess I'm talking about Flash Gordon. Sam Jones. Flash Gordon.
Oh, Flash Gordon. Right.
Really, really, really nice guy. Salt of the earth. Terrific guy. Now, he hadn't been to conventions. It sort of got introduced to him about, 3 or 4 years ago. So he started to come to conventions. But before that, for a period, big slate of time, like 10 years, you didn't even know if he was dead or alive. He was nowhere.
Right.
He might have been some places, but he was really nowhere. So I took him aside and I walked him around a little bit. And I said, you got to relax. Just, if somebody's, tear comes to somebody's eyes because they fell in love with you at a movie, give them a hug. Just relax. This is not a big thing. This is a rare opportunity to connect with these people, and they'll love you. You're a nice guy, okay? So he's got agents, protecting him, and I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to make a negative thing about it, but agents do tend to protect the talent. So they tend to create a little distance. So I talk to them and I say, guys, take down the distance, just relax, enjoy yourself, okay? And he'll go, well, okay, my agent says this might be good for me. I said, and I would say, look, it's not only good for you. Let's be honest, okay? People think you're dead. No offense, okay? But if you're not in the public eye,
Right.
you don't exist. So if you come to comic book conventions, you've got between 25 and 100,000 people who suddenly discover, one, you're alive, and two, you're a nice guy. Now, what's that going to lead to? That I don't care what your agent says, but your agent is going to get business for you because now you're here. Flash Gordon is back, so you're going to get work. So he he started to think about it, so, give people a hug. It's good. Everything's fine. Within a year, he got gigs doing a Sylvester Stallone movie. I think two or three, about 3 movies within a year's period of time. Because he went to the conventions, because he was the real person that he really is, and it's to his advantage to do that. And Nick, on a business level, you can say, well, it's really nice that he's a nice guy and all the rest of that stuff, but he gets to talk about people who might have worked on the movie poster or the advertising for Flash Gordon, who knows this actor or that actor or whatever it is. So now he's connecting with people. Now everybody knows. Now he, comes to my comic book shop in LA every couple of weeks and buys his comic books at my comic book shop. And every time he comes in, he's nice to everybody. If there's anybody in the store, they ask for his autograph. He says, sure. He does the autograph. He talks to them. He's a real person, and people just love it. So when he shows up, it's like, oh, wow, let's have a little signing, and we'll do a little signing. So there's a lot to be said for being nice. You can say, well, I'm nice because it's money. Nah, I'm nice because I like to be nice. Nah, it doesn't matter. What's nice about being nice is being nice. Right. There's nothing better than that. Because look, for example, I have kids and I have grandkids. I like kids. I'm one of those guys, I'm like the American. The ugly American or the good American or whatever. I love kids. I love the country. I love everything about America. I wish I could love this president, but if you have to take that out, I'm sorry. He's a jerk, and we're glad to get rid of him. But outside of that, it's a great country, So I get kids, and a kid will come and he'll say, I can draw. And I say, well, come on over here. We'll draw together. And I put him on my lap. And we sit and we take my light box out, we put paper down, and I say, you can draw on my drawing. He says, so he'll look at it, he'll go, ooh, like that, right? And I'll put a pencil in his hand, he'll draw on my drawing. And people will go, oh, you're drawing on Neal's drawing. No, it's a kid, it's okay, it's fine. He can draw all he wants on my drawing. And so we sit and we have a good time. Next time I see that kid, later in the day or the next day, he runs up and hugs me. I mean, what do you get that's better than that? Really? I mean,
no, it's great.
You've always definition of why it's good to be nice. There it is, right there.
You've always been generous. You've also always been a leader, a teacher, someone who's given advice. I remember when Joe Quesada first became editor-in-chief of Marvel, and you sent him a letter congratulating him. And in the letter, you said, don't let the job get to you. I'm going by memory, so forgive me if I don't have it perfect. You said, don't let the job get to you. Don't let it get you down. Treat every day like it's your first day, because you have the best job in the world. And whatever you do, don't stop exercising, because you will need that outlet to stay healthy. Right. I mean, you sent him a letter out of the blue. I don't know what your relationship with Joe was before that, but you basically, you politely, you kind of, in a way, you christened him, but you also just said, enjoy what you have. Don't lose sight of enjoying what you have. And that was just out of the blue, and it meant a lot to him.
Nick, I'm everybody's dad. You want to have a dad or an uncle. You want to have somebody like me around, because you want to feel like the vibe you're sending out there is coming back, and there's people who notice. And Joe Quesada did some really good things when he started, and he took a leadership position because it feels natural for him. So he came, and the only real conversation outside of, I might have sent a letter or two, but outside of that, we had a conversation. I remember it was what's his name's party at the San Diego convention. The party that has every year. Chapman. So Chapman had a party. Okay, so we were kind of walking to the party. There's always one every year. It's not rowdy or anything. Generally, we get into arguments about comic books. Me and Paul Levitz go off in the corner and yell at each other. But here's Joe, and we're talking, and he's talking about, they're offering me this, and I finally said, look, let's be up front here. We don't need necessarily writers to be guys in charge. We need people who can write and can draw. Okay, you can write and you can draw. You're a responsible guy. Maybe you work too hard on your pages. It seems to me you go against yourself sometimes because you put so much work into your pages, and you have to make a living. Well, you know what? I think you can take all those things that you believe in and you think, and you can make them part of what you do at Marvel and take that position. I think it would be very good. And I think somebody from the trenches ought to be in charge as much as possible. And that's how we ought to do it. This is an industry who needs people like that. Now we got Jim Lee over at DC, and now we got Joe Quesada over at Marvel. Now you really can't beat that,
No,
So
you can't.
I would be crazy not to encourage that if the possibility exists for me to do that. So I would just do I would imagine.
And ultimately it helps him, and that helps the industry because it keeps him going.
Well, it helps the industry because it helps the industry stay on an even footing with the talent. There's times when the talent is forgotten or overlooked. And if you have somebody like Joe Quesada there who's going to say, wait a second, guys, double page spreads where you got all the comic book characters in the world and the artist is going to have fun. Maybe he's not having fun. Maybe you ought to put a little bit more writing in there. Maybe structure the story a little bit more. And the reason that Joe Quesada is good is that he knows story. He understands story. Joe Quesada, listen to what I'm going to tell you guys what Joe Quesada did that a lot of people got mad at him for. Okay, but I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Spider-Man, was turning into an adult. I mean, he was getting married. He was going to have a kid. He was basically Spider-Man. But we have grown up with Spider-Boy. Nobody says it, but it's true. He's not Spider-Man. He's Spider-Boy. He's a teenager, okay? He shouldn't be a man. He doesn't have the stature of a man. He doesn't have the height of a man. He's a teenager, okay? So they came to that realization up at Marvel. So what do? Okay? Well, Joe Quesada did a story, I think with Mephisto or somebody,
yep.
where his growth, his adulthood, in effect, was taken away from him, but he would have to lose things. He would have to lose a wife. He'd have to lose a potential kid. And that would, it would happen later on in life. So in a way, he was thrust back in time. So he became Spider-Boy again. Now, a lot of fans got upset about this. But the truth of the matter is, it's better for our industry, for our characters to stay the same age as they are when we were introduced to them. So when Batman gets gray around the temples, the truth is that we don't want to see Batman gray around the temples. We don't want to see an aging character who starts to have kids, and now we have to deal with the kids. Then we have to deal with this other kid. And then suddenly time is moving forward over here, but it's not moving forward over here. So when the people who do the films start to do the films, they go by the old standard. They go by, it's Batman, okay, until somebody walks in and says, let's put gray on Batman's temples. And all the fans go, why does he look like he's, 50, 60 years old? Why is that? It's Batman. He's like 29 years old. He can jump over cars and stuff. What's the deal? So now we've been thrown into chaos because we're not basically following our standard rules. Doc Savage doesn't get older. Conan doesn't get older unless you write about him at some future generation time. Keep them the same age because that's the character we know. If you want to create an older man, hey, go out and create your own character. Don't use Bob Kane's character. So now we've got this this unknown debate. Do they get older or don't they get older? Well, then you start realizing, pretty soon Batman's going to be a grandfather. What the hell is that? And so now it's sort of like trying to do time travel stories. In time travel stories, you have what's called the butterfly effect. You know what the butterfly effect is?
Absolutely, of course.
Okay, the butterfly effect is the disaster of time travel. All you got to do is go back in time and kill a butterfly and everything changes.
Sliding doors.
So time travel stories are the worst stories to do because there's no logic behind them. They make no sense. So one of the things you can do if you're a decent writer and you do have a sense of responsibility is avoid time travel stories because they never work. Okay. Another thing you can do is stop making your characters older. Keep them the same age. Nobody cares. It's comic books. Batman is 29 years old. Superman is 29 years old. Green Arrow is 29 years old. They're all about the same age, and they're all young. They haven't gotten that,
except Speedy. He's 17.
That's the problem. Is then Marvel ran into it first when they had to bring characters back from the 40s. So suddenly you got Captain America, so you had to freeze him in ice. So now you had to somehow allow these 40s characters to come into modern times. So they did all kinds of contrivances to create these things. And almost the truth is, better to leap over these things as much as possible because they start to sound, that's the joke that the comic book fans go, yeah, he's dead. Sure, he's dead. No, he's not dead. He'll come back to life in 2 issues. It's a joke. We laugh at ourselves because it's a stupid problem that we've given ourselves, and then we keep on trying to solve it, and you can't solve it. So there's having somebody like Joe Quesada in charge. You may not like what he does here and there, but he's solved that problem. It's now Spider-Boy. It's not Spider-Man.
That's the whole thing. And you will ruffle feathers, and fans who get their feathers ruffled, you're engaging them at the very least. You're getting new fans. You may lose some fans, but it's growing. Let's talk about one of the first.
Listen to this for a second, okay?
Sure.
I had DC Comics has reprinted all my Batman stuff in 3 volumes, right?
Right.
So you can, and every 2 years they reprint them in another version. This year they print them in double-sided two books a volume. Then suddenly they put them in a soft cover. Then they put them in a hardcover. Then they put them in a hardcover that has a slipcase, and they sell it to you for $75, which is totally insane. Then they do this version, then they make the pages bigger, and then they do this, then they do that, and do that. We started off on this journey up at DC by me saying, guys, if you're going to reprint my stuff, and let's be honest, you're reprinting my stuff, okay? It's not, a bunch of Batman stories. It's my stuff. So let's be straight with that. That's my conversation with Paul Evans. So I would like to recolor that stuff. Oh, well, the fans won't like that. No, 5 fans won't like it. 10 fans won't like it. But fans are not those 5 or 10 guys. Those are like the old bald guys that don't change my character. You've destroyed it. Why do you let Neal Adams touch those pages? They just get all wanked out, right? But the people who buy the books to read them are their sons or their grandsons who haven't seen these stories. Well, do they want to see that crappy color with those big dots and the color going over the lines and the printing so bad on yellowed paper? They go out of their way to find yellowed paper so it'll look like crappy old comic books. And then they expect them to sell. They expect them to be sold to kids. Well, kids have never seen that stuff except in that where the old guys shop and they pull out the comic books and they do these collections and stuff. So I started recoloring those stories, and I even added some art to it, and I fixed the art because I started early on in my comic book career. So then those 10 letters came in, sure enough, and DC is calling me saying, we're getting tons of letters. People are really upset about you doing this. I said, hold on, just a second. How many letters are you getting? Well, lots of letters. I mean, just specifically, how many? Well, we got letters on the desk. Or how many letters are on the desk? Well, about 10. So you're going to change moving forward in time because of 10 letters from some 10 cranky old men? Really? Really? What about the kids out there that want to read the comic books? You've got a print run set for 12,000 copies of these books. 12,000 copies of those volumes, and you're going to sell them for $75, okay? For with a slipcase, you're going to make $500,000 per volume on your first printing, and you're worried about those old guys bitching about it doesn't look like it looked like when you were a kid. You know what they can do? they can go to their local comic book shop and buy those old comic books.
Actually, they probably have. They probably have them already. They probably have them.
It's just this kind of stuff doesn't work with the modern world where you're trying to do better all the time, and you have people holding you back because they have a memory. Their memory is going back, and Tony the Tiger, he can talk, and the little worm, and it's like, oh guys, please leave me alone. Just read the comic books, and if you don't like it, it's okay. You don't have to buy it. You can go in the back of the store, because those comic book stores would love you to go into the back of the store and drop about $80 to buy an old wrinkled old comic book, because they make money. So let's do that.
Let's talk about one of the. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. We're good.
Let's talk about one of the first artistic creative directors, Dick Giordano. You worked with him in at least 3 capacities: partner, continuity,
right,
boss at Charlton, because I think you started your early work at Charlton. And
no, I never worked at Charlton.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
For some reason, I thought Bionic Man.
You're missing about an acre and a half of history here, but that's okay.
Okay, and third as an inker.
I started by doing Archie comic book pages.
Yep,
that's my first work. Then I did a syndicated. Then I did advertising comic books for a place called John and Cushing, where I was paid a lot more than people who were doing comic books. I did comics for advertising. I did stuff for Bell Telephone, in Boys Life magazine, and Tintex ads, and all these different advertising things. And where comic book guys were being paid $50 a page, I was being paid $200 and $300 a page. So because I had a family, and I had to earn a living, and I'm smart enough to know where the money is. So I go there where the money is, because I don't like to go where the money is not. Anyway, so I did the advertising stuff. Then I learned to do storyboards, and I did storyboards for advertising agencies. Then I did a syndicated strip based on the old Ben Casey TV series. And I did that for 3.5 years. Then just when I ended the strip, I had a slow period, and I thought, you know what? Maybe I can pick up some work temporarily until my advertising work picks up. I'll see what's going on, because I know when I got out of school, it was for the birds. It was really for the birds. They weren't hiring anybody new. They felt everybody thought they were going to go out of business in a year. It was the worst thing in the world to try to become a comic book artist. So I did everything, but even though at the same time I was doing comic books. I was doing comic books for this reason, and that reason. Syndicated strip, advertising, never directly for the comic book companies. So finally I went to Jim Warren's place, Warren Publishing, for Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella.
Right.
And a new employee who was working there was really pulling everything together and did a fantastic job. Archie Goodwin.
Fantastic. I agree.
Right. Immediately gave me work. He did these little layouts. They were terrific. It was really wonderful working with him. Then I discovered that I was working too slow, because I was putting my heart and soul into this stuff, and I was being paid $50 a page. I could get that in one evening at an advertising agency. So I went over to DC Comics to see whether or not things had cracked open. As it turns out, Nick, I had gotten a syndicated strip. I had helped Joe Kubert get a syndicated strip based on the book The Green Beret.
Right.
Which was, Joe Kubert was the perfect guy for it. I found my way I was on the inner circle of comic strips. So I convinced them that they should try Joe Kubert. I told them that they may not like it at first, but they'll end up loving it. And so he got to do the Green Beret syndicated strip, which is a lifelong dream of any comic book artist, right? To get a strip, that's a big deal. Not anymore, but it used to be. So he got that. So I knew that Bob Kanigher, who was the editor of the war comic books at DC Comics, he was short a guy, because I had taken him away. I had taken Joe Kubert away and given him a better position doing a syndicated strip, but I knew that Bob Kanigher was short a guy, and his best guy, which was Joe Kubert. So although Bob Kanigher had Russ Heath, and he now had lost Mort Drucker to Mad Magazine, there was a big space in the war comics. So I went over and I showed my stuff, and sure enough, Bob Kanigher hired me to do war stories. And that was my entry into doing comic books per se, comic books as floppies, you know. Everything else was other stuff, but that was the first real comic book work that I did for Bob Kanigher at DC Comics. So I never I never worked with Dick Giordano before that. It was Carmine Infantino who went to Charlton and rated them for their best talent. And at that time, Dick, as editor up at Charlton, which is I think up in Connecticut, hired Dick Giordano, and Dick in turn hired Jim Aparo and other guys that he had been working with up at Charlton, and he brought new talent over to DC Comics. That when he got over to DC Comics, he had the room across from me. I had a room with an autograph in it so I could trace photographs. And he was across from me in a room with Julie Schwartz. And we became friends practically immediately. And one of the reasons was that Dick actually had done Ben Casey in the comic books for one of the, for Dell or somebody like that, maybe Western. So we got along. He turned out to be a pretty good inker for me. I might have broken his balls a little bit, but essentially he became my inker at DC Comics. So that was the beginning of our relationship. And then he became my editor because they didn't have an editor on Deadman, so it had no editor. So because what's his name, Miller, had left, he had cancer, he had to leave. So they had nobody to take over Deadman. So I took it over. I did the editing, writing, and drawing. And then after I did a few issues and Dick Giordano came along, Dick became the official editor. But Dick just basically let me do what I wanted to do. I mean, we talked over the story very quickly, and I went ahead and did Deadman. So I wrote and drew Deadman. Later on, I may be telling stories out of school, but there was a conflict. I mean, Carmine, unfortunately, as great an artist as he is, had certain jealousies when other people got too much attention. And people found their way out somehow when they were getting too much attention. That happened with, I can't think of his name, had white hair, did Wonder Woman. What was
Ross Andrew?
No. Jeez, I can't think of his name. He used to do Justice League.
Sikowski. Mike Sikowski.
Mike Sikowski, right. Mike Sikowski got too much attention doing Wonder Woman, and somehow he found his way out of there through Carmine's auspices. Then it was very clear that Dick Giordano was getting an awful lot of attention because everybody sort of was following the artist and following Dick, and Dick had a very kind of comfortable attitude toward his the people that work with him. And so eventually, I mean, after I kind of finished at DC, I was getting too much attention too, to be perfectly honest. And there's a lot of other things came up, a lot of parts of the stories that are missing here. But then Dick came over and worked at my studio, which is Continuity, and I invited him to be partner. He was partner with me for about a year.
Okay.
It was a very good relationship, a wonderful relationship. But DC Comics, after a while, after realizing that I had captured probably the most talented person that they had there, rehired Dick as editor-in-chief, and he became head of DC Comics.
There's I don't know if this is true, and maybe this is a question that is so untrue but I've always been curious about this. There's one story, since you brought up Carmine, there's one story that you got into an argument with Carmine because you were selling more books and you wanted a raise, and Carmine said to you, "No one makes more money than me." And you said to Carmine, "Great, give yourself a raise and then give me one." Any truth to that, or just a story?
Not even a story. It's not even a story. No, it's amazing. It's not even a story. First of all, Carmine wasn't paid by page rate. So You didn't. There's no way that I could make more money than he did. He was paid by salary.
Okay.
I was a freelancer. I was not ever paid more than anybody. I had to, when we formed the academy, I had to plot against the companies to cause some friction, to cause people to be paid more. And I will tell you the story of how it happened if you want to hear it.
Sure.
Okay.
That's what we're here for.
So we formed an academy. In fact, it was partially formed by, what's his name, Jim Warren. He was an arrogant little guy, and he felt as a publisher that he ought to be on the side of the workers. Of course, he only paid people $50 a page, but there you go. Anyway, so he invited everybody up to his penthouse apartment where he had this black piano sitting on a white polar bearskin rug. It looked exactly like you'd imagine a Playboy apartment would look, you know. And so I think he really did this to invite us up to look at his apartment to show us how we were, you know, so much lower than he was. But he helped to begin the concept of having an academy of creators, comic book artists and writers. Well, when we began this, Stan Lee decided he wanted to run for president of the academy. So everybody went to Stan quietly and said, you know, Stan, you're management. I mean, this is really not a good thing for you to do. He said, no, I'm not management. I get paid page rate just like you guys. I work on the weekends and I work at night. I'm just like you guys. Well, it's not exactly, Stan. I mean, you're the editor, you're the guy in charge. No, it's not. No. So Stan ran for president, right, of the academy. I ran for vice president because that's it wasn't like the president of the United States. I ran for vice president, and I knew I was going to get it because I knew I was going to do all the work, and that's why they, you know, make me vice president so I can do all the work. So I did all the work, and that was fine because I pretty much started the ball rolling a couple of years before that. So we set up our first meeting of comic book artists and writers at the Illustrators Club in the 60s. And what street is that, Maryland? 64th Street?
Something like that.
Like the Illustrators Club. Wonderful place. I mean, and if you get a chance, you've probably been there. They got red doors.
Yeah, Society of Illustrators, yeah.
Society of Illustrators, right. On the second floor, they have a restaurant. It's really nice, and they have paintings on the wall. And every once in a while, you see Norman Rockwell and things. It's juice for for artists. You know, it's wonderful. First floor is a gallery. That's really good. Then they business further upstairs. So they rented the club for us to have our first meeting. So we went there and we invited, you know, every artist and writer. Now, everybody was located in the New York area. Okay, because we didn't have the internet and we didn't have the kind of things we have now. So you really have to live near DC or Marlborough, or reasonably, you know, up to Connecticut, say. So everybody came to the meeting. People I got to meet people I'd never met. Jack Kirby got to meet his inkers. Got to meet what's his name? Who's the best? His kind of best inker just died recently.
Joe Sinnott.
Joe Sinnott, yeah. Got to meet Joe Sinnott. Like the people are meeting people that they had never met before because artists would just either send in pages or drop off pages and leave. You know, there wasn't even a pot of coffee. So guys got to go to the Illustrators Club, that was great, and got to meet everybody that they knew who they were, but they had never met them, right? So I now, of course, for me, this is like very joyful because I'm getting to meet all these guys that, you know, like, I may be the vice president and I may be making the speeches, but I get to meet Kurt Swan. I get to meet Murphy Anderson. I get to meet Carmine. You know, I already know Carmine, but I get to meet these guys. You know, it's really, really great. You know, I'm having a great time. Stan is having a hard time, okay? Because Stan is standing around and he's looking at everybody. He comes over to me and he says, Neal, I got a problem. I said, what's the problem, Stan? You've been voted your president. I mean, you know, you're fine. He says, no. He says, I don't even know who these people are. I don't recognize anybody. I said, Stan, half of these guys work for you. He says, I know, but I never see them. He says, like that guy with the beard over, the big guy with the beard, he's coming over here. He's going to say hello to me. I have no idea who he is. I said, Stan, that's John Buscema, your best artist. Oh, John, it's so good to see you. Stan grabbed his hand and, hey, wonderful. So we got Stan Pasek. I had to hang around with Stan and reintroduce him to all the people who work for him, right? So anyway, I'm walking around the floor, and I run into Kurt Swan, because, like, you know, he's the Superman guy. He's the best Superman artist of all. So I meet Kurt Swan, and we're talking, and I say to him, look, Kurt, just out of curiosity, how much do you get paid a page? Kurt said, "Oh, we don't talk about how much we get a page, because, you know, it's like, no, it's not something, you know, it's not something to talk about." So I said, well, you know, the truth is that, you know, I don't mind talking about what I get paid. I was just curious about what other people made, because, you know, you should be paid more than me, of course. You've been, you know, you're the Superman guy. He said, well, Neal, we don't, you know. I said, well, I was just saying, because I get paid $55 a page, I was just wondering what you get paid. So he paused and he said, well, as of Monday, I'm going to get $55 a page. Apparently, I was being paid $5 a page more than Kurt Swan.
That is such a great answer.
You can see the light. You can see the light go on in his eyes. So I thought, this is a good idea. So I walked around the rest of the room and I told everybody how much I got paid. So that following Monday, DC and Marvel suddenly had to give raises to a whole bunch of guys.
Okay, so another rumor for you to affirm or dispel. Sure. There's a rumor that because the artists weren't getting the artwork back from DC, you went and had a meeting with DC and said, listen, the artwork belongs to the artists, so you should give it to us. If you don't give it to us, it's an asset, and you should start paying taxes on it. Which do you prefer?
Well, I think it was a little bit more subtle than that. I think I said, you know, you guys pay for the copyright. You don't pay for the artwork, they say. And then they had lawyers there. No, we buy the artwork. We pay for the artwork. No, I'm sorry. You guys are lawyers. I prefer not to talk to you, but if you want to talk to me, okay, then try to understand this. You're not paying for the right to own the artwork. You're paying for the right to reproduce the artwork. I get paid for you to take my reproduction rights, but you're not paying me for artwork. They say, well, we feel we are. I say, well, okay, you're lawyers, okay, and it doesn't really matter what you feel. No offense, I'm not offending you, but what you feel is nothing. You're working for your client, which is the publisher, okay? So that publisher can feel anything they want, and you can repeat their words, but the law doesn't say that. They say, well, how do you know what the law says? Well, I happen to have the law right here, and so I put a book on the table. And I said, okay, so this is called the copyright law, okay? There's a reason it's called the copyright law, because it's a nice, simple word, copyright, the right to copy. See, that's what it means. It means the right to copy. So you're buying the right, and I'm not trying to simplify it for you. You're paying for the right to copy it. That's what you're paying for. The right to copy it. You're not paying for the right to own it. That's something else. You're paying for the right to copy. If you want to own it, buy it. You can buy it, put it up on your wall. But even if you buy it, unless you buy the copyright, you can't copy it. You can buy it. A fan can buy a drawing of Superman from me. It's just a drawing. It's what's called a one-off, okay? You can buy that one-off, okay, and you can put it up on your wall, but you can't copy it. You can't print it. You can't Xerox it. You have no copyright. You understand? So the lawyers are like looking at each other. I say, okay. The problem is that you guys have never purchased the right to own the artwork. And so you don't. So if the state of New York comes to me, artist in my studio, and they say, well, we're checking up on sales tax. You sell artwork, right? I say, no, I sell the right to copy. They say, oh, really? So you don't sell artwork to DC Comics or Marvel Comics? No. They say, well, because if you do, you haven't paid taxes on that stuff, and they haven't paid you, and you haven't paid us. Well, I don't sell the I don't sell the artwork. I sell the right to copy it. It's the copyright. They say, well, in that case, Mr. Adams, okay, we are going to come back in 2 weeks, and we want to see 3 months worth of artwork that you sold to DC and Marvel and anybody. We want to see 3 months of it. And if we don't see all 3 months of it, we want to see 3 years of it. And if we then don't see 3 years of it, we're going to go through your whole career and you're going to be sales taxed for everything you sold. Oh, oh, that's not good. That's not good. That's a bad thing. So I got artwork together. It may not have been every piece that we were talking about, but I got copies and stuff, enough to satisfy the sales tax people. Okay. And they were happy and they walked away and they said, fine. Okay. Now, you guys, you're in possession of 50 years of artwork. Easily. It would be really bad if somebody went to Albany, the state capitol, and went to that building. I happen to know that building because I've been in that building a couple of times. And go up to the 4th and 5th floor, or 5th floor, where you might have a little cubbyhole room. And they might say to those people, you know, there's a company down in New York that's got 50 years of artwork that they haven't paid 1 penny of sales tax on. The week after that, they started giving artwork back.
That's pretty cool. You know, when Marvel,
there's no BS here. I mean, that's the truth. That's how the law.
No, and it's a great story, especially considering, you know, when you look at the fact that DC did 3 things with the artwork. They stored it, they destroyed it, or they gave it away to kids walking around, which out of the 3 things that they did, giving it away to kids was probably the least.
No, I myself was the recipient of something like 8 pages that Sol Harrison gave to guys at the School of Art and Design, or Industrial Art, when he came and did his boring speech and told us that in a year there weren't going to be comic books. He gave pages away. He gave away Carmine Infantino pages, Joe Kubert pages, Ross Andrew pages, a whole lot of pages. And then I went and traded with other guys so I could get the best stuff. So I'll tell you a quick little story. I ended up with 7 or 8 pages. Okay, I had 2 Joe Kubert pages. I had 1 Carmine Infantino page, and it was inked by him, and it was Pow Wow Smith. The Western character was an Indian, but he had inked it, okay. Had a couple of Ross Andrew pages. I had a Dan Barry page. I had a Russ Heath page. I had a Seymour, what's his name? What's Gil Kane's original name? Sachs.
Oh, yeah. I can't remember.
Eli
Katz.
Eli Katz.
Eli Katz, yeah.
Yeah. His name was Eli Katz. And it was a science fiction story for Julie Schwartz, I think. So I had all these pages. So when I got into comic books later in my career, in my 20s, I would pick the right moment, right? And I would give these guys back their pages. That cool?
Wow.
That cool?
Yeah.
It was like I got a present for you. And they would like blow them off, not all of them. Joe was grateful, but he says, did a lot better stuff. The problem was that in those days, between you, me, and the fence post, and everybody who may be listening, is that the artists didn't even respect their own work. I had arguments at the Academy with guys, and they said after a while they get frustrated with me, and they would say, Neal, why do you care? They're not worth anything. And I'd have to say, guys, that's really not the point. The point is, this is what's right and this is what's wrong. Well, but they're not worth anything. No, whether they're worth anything now or they're going to be worth anything in the future, they belong to us. They're our property, and they're keeping it. And then they're keeping it and destroying it or giving it away. But they're not doing anything with it. They're just keeping it because we're letting them. But it's not the law. But it's not worth anything. They're not worth anything. Oh, guys, really?
That's a circular argument, right?
Yeah, can't go any place with that. You know as much as anybody how valuable that stuff is, and the way the whole thing turned out. It's a very, very different story.
Would you have two of the highest sold? First of all of your art sells for incredible money, and there's a reason for it.
No,
but
better be I'm somebody.
Well, between Green Lantern 76 cover and the Batman Joker cover, you have two pieces of art that have realized the most amount of money ever. I'll ask the question, huh? Yep, 600
on the Joker.
Yep, $1 million between the two of them. Two pieces of art, $1 million.
Exactly.
When you were fighting for this, would you ever in your wildest dreams have thought that the art would be worth that much?
I knew it was worth something.
Right.
And whatever it would be worth was not. I really actually wasn't. From my point of view, it was a moral argument that they were taking one, an illegal and an immoral stand. The companies. And they didn't do it because they're bad guys. Some of the people who worked for the companies were people like Carmine. They did it because they didn't know what better to do. Nobody was making policy. Nobody was using their head. Nobody was thinking these processes through. I mean, I had to tell Carmine that there was a guy in the production room cutting up original art pages. And I had to threaten to punch him in the face if he cut up any more until I settled the question. Because the guy was cutting up, he'd take 5 or 6 pages and cut them 3 times on the paper cutter and drop them into the garbage.
Wow.
Imagine seeing that happen in front of your own eyes. Just unbelievable. I told him, don't cut any more. And he kind of brushed me off, and I said, okay, let me put it this way. If I come back here and one of these pages is cut, I'm going to come back and punch you in the face. Oh, well, if you feel that way about it. So I went in and I talked to Carmine about it, and it was almost like, you're right, Neal. You're right. You're right. The page should be returned. And I'm talking to him, and I realize I'm not getting through to him that it's incidental to his world, because he worked in a world where when he finished the pages, he turned them in. That was it. I mean, he had millions of dollars worth of pages that he just turned in and got destroyed. Millions. Okay? Wow. All of these guys. Think of Kubert. Think of Russ Heath. Think of Mort Drucker. I mean, Mademoiselle Marie. Where are those pages? I don't know. And so I'm talking to him. Finally, I said, Carmine, look, because Carmine had sort of based his position as art director, because this is his new position. He did Dead Man, and then he went right from there to art director at DC. So he was in a position to make a difference, but he didn't know anything. So I had to finally say to him, Carmine, one more page gets cut up, I'm out of here. She said, oh, relax, Neal. And so we went in and talked to Erwin Donenfeld and Jack Leibowitz, and he talked them into not returning them, but to hold on,
at least not
to destroy them.
Right.
not to destroy them, but to hold on to them. So they held on to them. It took me, from that point on, it took me 7 years to get the artwork returned.
Yeah, there's the story that one of the interns or someone in the office that he volunteered to take the cut art to the dumpster, the incinerary, wherever they were taking them, and then would hide some of the cut sheets so that he could save the art, which is why you'll see some art cut in threes because he didn't want.
Have you seen
Huh?
any like that? Have you seen any like that?
A few, mostly Golden Age.
No, it would have been a smart thing to do. And there's various guys that were smart enough to get that stuff. Certain young writers, I don't want to name names.
Well, Marv Wolfman has been open about it. He got 8 out of 9 pages of a Kurt Swan story that was used in Action 1000.
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but they had a regular business going on, those guys.
Oh, they did it as a business? Oh my God.
Yeah, at Suling's conventions, they'd rent a room and they'd have sales.
Wow.
All you do is go to the drawer and pull them out.
So, okay, so going, that wasn't your only brush with attorneys at that point. There's the story that I may not be getting 100% right, but Jerry Robinson one night was working, and I can't remember the talk show host, maybe Snyder, and I'm sorry?
Maybe. Go ahead. I need to hear the story. There's a lot of stories involved with this whole thing.
And he heard that the Siegel and Shuster was not getting any compensation on Superman. And he couldn't believe it. He always assumed that they had retired rich, just like Bob Kane did. Because what he would do is while he was working, he would have the TV on as background noise. He couldn't work without the TV on. And then you heard about it and got involved. Now,
none of that is right.
Okay.
First of all,
I'll ask my question and then you'll correct me. I
have to correct you before you get there. Then you can ask your question.
Okay.
I hate to do it that way. I was working on the whole thing for a good 4 weeks to a month, a month and a half before I even called Jerry Robinson to get his help.
Wow.
So Jerry was never involved in the big battle. Jerry was at the end where I called him and I asked him if I could use the auspices of the Cartoonist Society that he was the ex-president of, the previous president of. And at that point, I brought Jerry in. But the battle had been taking place for weeks, and it was a massive confrontation.
All right. So the question becomes, honestly,
and by the way, that thing, that TV show that you're talking about, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and myself were on that show.
Okay. So this is going to be on a couple of levels. First and foremost, so probably 3 questions. One, why, considering you were at the beginning of an illustrious career, probably one of the first, if not the first, real superstar artist that the industry ever had, you had more to lose than the gain. I mean, it's kind of like James Garner. James Garner was the first actor to sue a movie studio for royalties. And everyone told him, don't do it, you'll be ostracized. And Garner said, no, they owe me money, I'm getting my money. So you put yourself in the mix. The original art, you actually had your own vested interest as well as the entire artistic community. But when it came to Siegel and Shuster, you were fully altruistic. You were doing the right thing for the 2 Golden Age creators that basically helped build the DC universe, without whom the superheroes may not have entered the way they did. And then, so, you put yourself at risk. And then if now you can correct me here, when it was announced, and I can't remember the the news person. It was a famous news person. The story goes that everybody was in the same room once everything was resolved, and there was going to be a story on the nightly news talking about how two kids from Cleveland finally got their due, and it didn't happen until the very end of the broadcast. What was it like? If that is true, what was it like being in that room when they finally heard that said aloud?
None of that's true.
Okay, I got to read different history books.
But that's how stories go. Once it gets passed from one person to another, stories change, things happen, and they evolve into different things. The assumptions are made, and it's hardly ever the right story. I have to back up and go to the points that you were asking about right from the beginning. Was I in? No, shoot.
Why'd you do it? Why'd you do it? Was the first question. Why put yourself at risk?
Yeah. Okay. First, I was not at risk. I'm never at risk. I'm not a stupid person. I never put myself in front of the train. You have to remember that Warner Brothers had a connection to the mafia. I shouldn't be saying this out loud, but there you go. They had a connection to gangsters, let's say, through movie theaters. So it was not a good company to mess with. Okay. So I knew even at the beginning, if I were going to put myself in a position here, then it had to work out so that Warner Brothers looked good.
Okay. Warner
Brothers didn't own DC Comics. They purchased DC Comics. They were not involved in ripping off Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. That was Jack Leibowitz. Jack Leibowitz had them sign that piece of paper, which gave away their rights. Then there was all kinds of court cases. There was a court case on Superboy, which was handled badly. Then there were certain promises made by certain lawyers, and they reneged on their promises, and all kinds of stuff happened. And so, in the end, they had to come out. In my head, they had to come out that Warner saved the day. Understand?
Yeah.
So the way you do that is once everything is taken care of, assuming everything is taken care of, then you say, well, so look what this company did. The guys who created Superman, they've been put into this terrible position. They're suffering poverty and all the rest of this stuff. But Warner's, after conversations and after back and forth negotiations, have come to the rescue, and Christmas is coming, and we're going to celebrate the opening of the first Superman movie, the great Superman movie, and Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster are going to be guests at the opening day, and it's going to be wonderful, and they're going to be taken care of. Thank you, Warner Brothers. So that's the way it ended. Okay. Of course, the beginning was a little different than that. So how did it start, and how did I get involved? First of all, I'm not a good person to cross. Okay, just put it that way. I come from Brooklyn. You know something about Brooklyn, Nick, right?
I do.
Yeah.
Brooklyn and Philly.
Yeah, it's not a good thing. So if I was going to take up a fight, I had better know what I'm doing, and I better not really go ahead and cross the wrong people the wrong way. So I took it very, very carefully. First of all, Jerry Siegel sent a letter to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, and to one other newspaper, I forget what it was. And he sent the same letter. It basically was carbons of the letter, and sent one copy to me, who was now president of the Academy of Comic Book Arts. Stan was first, Dick Giordano was second, I was third, because I was doing all the work anyway. So I got the letter. It's like a 9-page letter, and it was a dramatic letter, very, very powerful letter. But what happens with a situation like that? You've got the New York Times and you got the Washington Post. So they'll run a story, and they did. They both ran the story, but they were newspapers. Okay, a newspaper will run a story. They might do a follow-up, and then a big company like Warner's is going to say, yeah, okay, so it's a bad day for us, bad publicity, but tomorrow's it's going to be fine. And these guys haven't got any money. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? So I realized, oh, this is just going to fly away. I got a copy of the letter. What am I going to do? Okay. So I went into my studio. I had read the letter and I had my cup of coffee, and I went into my studio and I said, look, any of you guys who want to be involved in this, I'm inviting you to be involved. If you don't want to be involved, you can say no now and you're out. You're not part of this, okay? But you're invited to participate and to help me. No glory, nothing. You get nothing for it, okay? You just get to help the guys who created Superman, which these two guys had disappeared as far as we were concerned. As far as I was concerned, when I was in high school, I had no idea who they were or where they were. So I invited everybody out of it. Some of the guys decided that, they'd run the course with me. And I said, okay, so this is the deal. You guys can read this letter. And we're going to fix this no matter how long it takes. However we fix it, we're going to fix it no matter how long it takes. We're not going to stop because newspapers aren't going to carry this on. Nobody's going to carry this on. Somebody has to step in and do it. So I have decided that I'm going to dedicate everything that we have in our studio, this studio, to undoing this. And when it's done, that's going to be the end of it, okay? And we won't stop until it's done. So those guys who agreed, and I don't want to name names, but there were guys in the studio who agreed, and some of them will tell you stories. I wrote to Jerry Siegel, and I said, look, you don't know who I am, but I'm the current president of the Academy of Comic Book Arts. He apparently did know who I was, and that's why he sent me the letter. I said, I would like to fight the fight. I said, I'd like to represent you, not as a lawyer, because I'm not a lawyer. I'd like to represent you publicity-wise. In other words, getting out there and getting the word out. So I would like to be your representative. In order to do that, you have to write me a letter. And you have to get Joe to sign it, that I am your representative and that I represent you in conversations, not negotiations, okay? So he said, okay. He wrote a letter, sent it to Joe. Joe sent it to me. Now I had the letter. So if anybody called me, I'd say, I got this letter. I represent them, not legally. I'm not a lawyer. I found out that there were conversations that were taking place between the company and their lawyers. What had happened is this. At age 45, their lawyers had convinced them if they would be quiet for 15 years and not say anything and essentially disappear into the woodwork, 15 years later, the lawyers would bring the case up again and go to the Supreme Court if they had to, and they would reclaim the rights to Superman, and these guys would have it back.
So they had to live in poverty for 15 years waiting for this.
Exactly. Now, look, you don't call somebody stupid, but that was stupid.
Wow.
So from ages 45 to 60, now they were 60 years old. Jerry had a heart condition. He worked as a clerk for $7,000 a year. Joe was legally blind. He could no longer work. He lived in his brother's apartment in Queens, I believe. He slept on a cot, regulation army cot, next to a window that had tape on it to hold it together, and in his brother's apartment. And that's how he lived for those years. Okay. So I decided, what I started to do essentially was Jerry found it in himself putting his vacation time together. He could come to New York and stay in a cheap hotel for 2 weeks. I believe it was 2 weeks. So he came to New York. So I started to take them around to the various television shows. That sports writer that was a big friend of Muhammad Ali, that guy with a wig and what's his name? The sports writer that was friends with Muhammad Ali.
Yeah,
Right.
he had the distinctive voice.
Yes, yes.
Cosell.
Howard Cosell.
Howard Cosell, yeah.
Cosell. Howard Cosell. Neal, why are you here at the show today? Oh, this is Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. What a story. What a story. Anyway, so I took him to the Howard Cosell show. He had a show for, I don't know, about 2 months, whatever it was. Other shows, other news shows. The problem was we ran out of money. They didn't have any more money. So I went to the news stations and I said, look, guys, this is a live story. Can you guys pay for their rent? Can you pay for Jerry's rent while he's in town? They said, no, we can't. You can't pay for a news story. I said, well, okay, how about this? You guys have petty cash, right? They say, yeah, we have petty cash. I say, just give me some money from petty cash and I'll pay for their hotel. So they'll stay in for another couple of days and I'll get it from the different news stations. So they agreed to do that. So the news stations paid for them to stay in New York without paying them as talent or whatever. They just gave me money out of petty cash to pay for their rooms because news stations, they can afford it. So I kept them in town, okay, and I had different meetings, different presentations, and after a while, the newspapers and the news stations, they were calling me every day because now it was a live story, and somebody was going to stick to it all the way through. They understood that, so I would get a call every day from every one of them in the New York area, and I would give what's the latest, what's going on. So they started following the story. It became like part of our lives, it's just one more. I used to take Joe, if I took Joe anywhere in a cab, I'd have to put my arm on the door jamb so he wouldn't bash his head against the door jamb because he was legally blind. He'd hit his head against the door. So we got going, and so I told Warner's that I would like to communicate with them, and I would like to speak to, I think his name was Steve Ross, was the president of the company. He gave the job of speaking to me to Jay Emmett, who was the nephew of Jack Leibowitz.
Right. Jay was in charge of promotions and licensing.
Right. No, he was, well, to give you his history, Jay Emmett was, he came back from Korea. Everybody loved him at DC. Really terrific guy. Went to Korea, fought, came back, and his Uncle Jack wanted to give him a job. And he said, no, I don't want to work for you, Uncle Jack. But I'll do anything else. I'll work for the company if there's something I can do. So Jack gave him the right to license all the characters, including Superman, especially Superman. Well, he made a fortune because this Licensing Corporation of America got really big, and Jay Emmett did very, very, very well. So since he was part of the DC thing, then Warner's, the head of Warner, said, okay, you take care of it. It's your thing. You talk to this Neal Adams guy. So I was on the phone with Jay Emmett every day, going back and forth, just trying to get them to begin to negotiate, to come up with something, because this was totally insane. So that took for, month and a half, 2 months, something like that. Finally, at the end, I was reaching the end of my rope, and I called, we had made a lot of progress. We opened communications. We got the lawyers off of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster because there was some kind of collusion going on. I can't tell you exactly what it was, but I managed to match up times and phone calls and stuff. So I got them off the case. So now we were operating independently. So now we were, in the midst of the battle but being friendly. The good thing about Jay Emmett was he's a really, really nice guy. So a lot of things happened that I'm not going to tell you about relative to Jay Emmett and what happened at DC. It had to do with the whole history of DC Comics, has to do with Jeanette Kahn, has to do with Sal Harrison, has to do with Carmine, has to do with all kinds of stuff. But I don't want to get into that, okay? In the end, the Cartoonist Society, as the ex-president of Cartoonist Society, Jerry Robinson, who was, of course, the creator of the Joker and Robin, okay, stepped up and worked with me on a last-ditch effort, even though the Cartoonist Society wasn't very cooperative at the beginning. I ran a red-hot rod up their asses, and I got them moving. So we had I'll tell you, I'll give you an idea of the story. This is a hot one, okay. I go to a meeting in what was then called the Allied Chemical Building. That was on Times Square. And Times Square is that, the building where the ball goes up?
Yeah.
It was originally called the Allied Chemical Building. Anyway, they would rent floors for different events. So they rented floors for meetings, including the Cartoonist Society, and so they would have executive meetings up there. And so Jerry invited me to come to one of their meetings. And so I came to the meeting and I outlined, what was going on. And they had their executive board. There was like 10 guys. And all of them had syndicated strips. And so I told them about what was going on with Jerry and Joe. They were all very interested. And I said, now I need your help because I've run out of people to go to. I've tapped out. Okay, I need somebody. If you guys don't help me, I'll go somewhere else. But I've already been to the Writers Guild. They turned me down because they're really not any writers as part of the executive board of the Writers Guild. They're just agents. So they had no interest. So I said, so I need you guys to help me out. So they talked amongst themselves, and they decided they would write a letter, and they would all sign it, and they would send it to the newspapers. And I had, at this point, I had been working with Jerry for a couple of days. We'd done a couple of things. And Jerry was getting a little bit suspicious because the guys were coming up with this solution of writing this letter. They'd even send it to the other floor where the sports cartoonists were, and they would get them to sign it. And so I'm quiet. I'm at the end of the table, and I'm quiet. I haven't said anything for about 20 minutes. And so Jerry's getting a little suspicious. He kind of looks over at me and he says, so Neal, what do you think of that? Write a letter, we all sign it. And he knew me by that point. Didn't take him long, okay? So I said, something like this. I'm just gonna shorten it, really short, say, you, curse word, have some goddamn nerve telling me you're going to write a letter. You guys are sitting here at this Allied Chemical Building. I don't know what you're paying for the rent. You're sitting in your suits, drive down from Connecticut in your Jaguars and your 1.5 kids, and with your little studios in the city, with your girlfriends and all the rest of the bullshit. And you're telling me, okay, that you guys are going to put your heads together and you're going to write a letter? Pardon me? Half your careers were based on Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. They made your life. They made this industry. If it wasn't for Superman, he's the first superhero. He is the lasting force that we have in our industry. And you guys are going to tell me that all you're going to do is write a letter? Go screw yourselves. And I walked out. Whoa. So I get to the near the elevators, and I'm telling you, this where they were having this meeting. It was this big floor, and they were at a table, and there was 2 lights above the table, so it was an empty floor. So they were like sitting out there. It would look like a movie, They got a table, a couple of lights, a bunch of guys sitting around it, and an empty floor. No tables, no chairs, nothing. And when you came into this floor, there was a person in the cloakroom taking your coat. Right? So I'm on my way out, and I go to the cloakroom. I'm going to get my jacket, right? So I give the girl my ticket, and the guy, little Irish guy, not Irish, but a little, tough little guy. He says that was a pretty good speech. Now, I'm telling you, the speech was longer, and it was nastier, a lot nastier. Okay. He says, that was a pretty good speech. I said, yeah, well, it's not going to do any damn good. So, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. He said, well, you know what, who owns this building? I said, I have no idea, really. He said, well, the building is owned by the Overseas Press Club. I said, oh, that's interesting. Cool. Wow, cool. He says, you know who I am? I said, I have no idea. He said, I'm the president of the Overseas Press Club, and if you want a news conference, you can have it tomorrow. I said, you come with me. And I grabbed him by the arm, and I took him over to the table, and I said, gentlemen, this is the president of the Overseas Press Club, and he tells us that if we want to have a press conference, we can have it tomorrow. Hey, well, we didn't have it tomorrow. We had it the following Tuesday. And all these cartoonists who had syndicated strips came and we had a press conference. And they blasted. They had little pictures of Dondi with tears coming out of his eye and drawings of Snoopy and guys sitting there, the famous cartoonists and stuff. And I basically stepped to the back and I just let them take over. And they did a press conference. That's when the phone started ringing. So that was the big deal. That's how that's what led to the end. That wasn't the end, but that was getting close to the end.
Well, I will say this. You may say you never put yourself in front of the train. I think you did put yourself at risk to at least some degree. At the very least, you put.
No, don't. I don't.
Let me say this.
I'm making more money doing advertising than I was doing comic books. Let's be honest, okay? I could have stopped doing. I had at that point, I was stopping doing comic books. I mean, a lot of people don't know it, but I have been doing regular comic books, regular books for like nearly 30 years between that time and until about 6 years ago. I was gone. You would always see me. You'd always find me. I would always be doing something. Some project or something or some show or something that I'll always be there. But basically, I had moved out of comic books because you can't rent a studio in Midtown Manhattan on the kind of money you make doing comic books. I did advertising, and that's the stuff that we're selling on our site.
Yeah.
You never. One of the things you never have to do in your life is worry about me. Okay, never. Because I cover my ass. I don't put myself or my family in any kind of danger or any kind of trouble. I don't do that. It's not the kind of thing I do. I protect all sides. They have these, this is between you and me, okay, in a weird way. They have these movies, where like the hero goes out and it's like the boat turns upside down in the ocean. You got 25 people and they're all trying to live. And they get knocked off one at a time, and the guy finally ends up out of the bottom of the boat with the girl and the dog and a kid. And so he's managed to rescue the girl, the dog, and the kid, but he's lost like 35 people. That's not a guy. That's not a guy doing a good deed or being a hero or anything. That's a guy failing. You lose everybody, you fail. Nobody, you bring all 35 people out, you're okay, in my book. Okay, you bring everybody out, take care of everybody, you're okay. My approach to things in general is unless it helps everybody, I don't do it for me. It's got to help everybody. Because you know what? One of the lessons I learned is if you help everybody, you help yourself.
Right.
I suffered the benefit of any fight I ever had by being one of the guys who profited by the good result. I was one of the crowd getting it. But for example, when I was fighting for the original art, remember those 7 years that went by?
Yeah.
I couldn't go in those drawers and take my artwork out, because if one person caught me one time going in those drawers and taking my artwork out, that would destroy my position.
Right. Then
I wouldn't be able to say anything. He takes his own crap. What's he talking about? what big high and mighty Neal Adams, ha ha ha, he's taking his own stuff out of there. So I had to leave my stuff in there so that when that palette got stolen from DC Comics, palette of original art, a crap load of that stuff was mine because I had to leave it there. But since then, how have I done, Nick?
Very well.
Very well.
Very well.
And I have lots of friends, and everybody is nice to me. It's pretty good.
I'm going to tell you my Neal Adams origin story now.
Okay, sure.
And then I'm going to pop up some art based on some of the creators you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my Neal Adams comic story, origin story.
Okay.
I started buying comics about 10 or 11 years old. Was born in South, like everybody, was born in South Philly. And you were talking about the mafia and Warner Brothers and the kidney parking systems and everything else. So I was born in this country, but I was born in South Philly. My parents were off the boat Italians, and they didn't speak English. So everyone spoke Italian to them. So I only knew the Italian language.
Sure.
Then when we went to school in the morning, we would go into school 2 hours earlier. Instead of being in class at 9, we had to be in class at 7 because they would start teaching us English while we were in school. And I gravitated towards comics by the time I was in the 5th or 6th grade. So I was buying the comics 3 for a quarter, maybe 3 for 20 cents in the bag with the covers ripped off. Because at that point, when the news
off or the title cut off.
Sometimes both. So mostly the title, but yeah. So as you know, probably people 50 and over know, basically when the newsstands were returning the comics, the distributors cut out the title or ripped the front cover, then put them back in the plastic bag and sold them back to the candy stores at 10 cents, and they sold it for 20 cents. So they double dipped. So I was buying comics and I was ravenous for them. I just loved it. And then one day in 8th grade, in class, they handed out Pope John Paul II by Stephen Grant, John Tertullione, and Joe Sinnott. And I will never forget looking at that comic and saying, oh my God, I've seen covers, full covers in the ads. I've never seen a comic with a cover. I made it my destiny to find a comic store at that point. And I did. So lo and behold, I start buying.
Because a few years before then, there wasn't any comic book stores.
There wasn't. This was the early 80s, beginning of the direct market. So I would go to the comic stores, and I had maybe $1 a week to spend on comics. So
That was good.
Well, yeah. And at that point, comics were 60 cents each. So I got to buy 3 comics every 2 weeks on average. So the comic stores were more of inclusive club at that point. There, if there were 10 consumers at a comic store in one day, that was a big day for the store. Your books were on the wall. With Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Batman, the X-Men. There were books on the wall by Michael Golden, Marvel Fanfare, all the Silver Age books that were on the wall. But to a degree, the more modern books were yours, Golden's, a few other, Frank Miller, a few other creators. And the comic store, the 3 books from Green Lantern, Green Arrow that they had were 76, I'm going to say 85 and 86 and 87. Basically, part 1, the 2 drug issues, which took me forever to realize why Speedy was the one taking drugs. Just took forever for a 13-year-old. Took me probably till I was 18 to realize why.
Right.
And 87, the first John Stewart. And something that will never happen today. And I would look at those books for months. And the rest of the books were in the back issue bin, but again, they were priced more. And one day, the guys were nice. They said, look, we'll open up the book, let you look at it, don't damage it. And I'm looking at Green Lantern, Green Arrow 86. Now, at that point, Flash was my favorite character. Batman was becoming my second favorite character because of Don Newton and Gene Colan. Love their art. I looked at that Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and my jaw dropped. And I just couldn't believe it. So you make friends, and this is the part where today this would never happen. There was this one kid who was in medical school. Or in college going to medical school. He was 19 years old, and he had the whole run. He had the whole run of that. He had the whole Frank Miller Daredevil run. He had the entire Marvel Fanfare first 8 issues or whatever. And he said, look, Nick.
So you killed him.
He said, look, Nick, you've been looking at these books for almost a year. If you want to come over my house a couple afternoons, you can come over my house and you can read the comics. And I was just like, oh my God. So I went over Bruce's house and I started reading Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and I was just amazed. And you don't realize this when you're 13, 14 years old. And there's a lot of discussion in the industry about politics in comics and social justice and everything else. And what I find amazing is that you and Denny found a balance in Green Lantern, Green Arrow that no one finds anymore. You had social commentary, you had politics, you had reality with drugs. You wrote a story in one of the most divisive eras of our country, but you still made it a comic story. I mean, when you look at it, in issue 76, you have Green Arrow explaining to Hal Jordan why he's wrong in defending someone who is actually more evil than the people that attacked him. You have this eye-opening, just emotion coming out of Hal when he's on the roof and the gentleman says, I've heard you've worked for the blue guys, that you've helped the Redskins, the purple skins, but what have you ever done for the black skins? And the way Hal's face fell, incredible. So then you not only have them go on a road trip, but one of the Guardians goes with them. You humanize the Guardians, which had never happened before. And you're really seeing a dichotomy between a Republican and a Democrat at that point. I mean, you're throwing everything in there. And once you get to issue 85, now the table is turned. Now it's Ollie who is blind to Speedy and his drug abuse that he left him behind. And it's Hal and Diana that make him have to see the light of day. So you flip the switch. So you're really showing the evolution and the growth of two iconic heroes at the same time, and you're doing it organically. And when you get to the end, I mean, you've got Hal Jordan taking this power ring and destroying Carol Ferris's airplanes because of the Jesus-esque character who died hanging on the plane. I mean, you just took the story so deep. And the introduction of John Stewart, you guys, I'm sure you guys said, we need to be with the times. We need to have someone else be Green Lantern, and it can't be another white guy. But you made it make sense. The story leading up to it, John Stewart almost getting into a fight with the police because of the way they were treating other people. You put more story in 3 pages than people today put in a comic. What you guys wrote over and drew over the course of about 14 issues, which the only thing that was kind of cool yet frustrating was Green Lantern 88, which was a beautiful cover by you and reprint work on the inside. But you made me love Green Lantern at that point. And I loved comics so much It's a far longer story. I'll try and give the shortest version of it. I started selling my comics so that I could buy more comics. And you and I, I talked to you a little bit about Fat Jacks once when we were in Connecticut at Terrificon. And Mike, I don't remember this, but Mike said I would go to comic stores and buy books at 50% off or 60% off when they had sales, and then go to his store and sell it to him at a profit so that I could buy more comics. And I started setting up at shows as a weekend warrior, but those 14 issues just drove me to want to make Green Lantern one of my two favorite characters. And then you have all the old stories with Green Lantern and the Flash that were awesome. But I thought you guys ended it on such a great note, with the last thing being Ollie throwing in the towel, feeling like he was being ineffective as a hero, and saying, I'm going to run for mayor. I mean, it is, and this is why I said in the beginning of this conversation, there are times I'll come to your booth at a show. There have been times where I've bought those collections and given it to friends saying, I can't believe you've never read this. You need to read this. Quite possibly one of the most important stories our industry has ever had. And no one, you didn't throw your personal politics into that story like you could have. You threw balanced politics. You showed both sides. You said there is no right or wrong. There is just difference of opinion, and everybody can learn and grow. Hal learned and grew. Ollie learned and grew. The Guardian learned and grew. It was just, I can never gush enough about the story you and Denny did there. And, you and Denny bringing the Joker, making him who he became, what you did with Ra's al Ghul and Talia. I mean, it's just the work you've done is such a great body of work, and it has influenced so many people.
It's why I can't escape from comic books. No matter how I try, no matter what else I do, it's always comic books, because people don't actually quite realize that in some weird ways, it's the perfect form. It's the perfect form. You've had in the history of magazines and printing and art, you've had single pictures done by artists that try to tell a story. You've had novels where you have a lot of description and a lot of writing, prose writing, some of which is good, some of which is fantastically good, some of which is terrible, some of which is just okay. But there's only one form where you take both the pictures and the words and put them together the way you do a movie, the way you do television, the way you do theater, but you do it in our form, We own this form. You can take, just to give you an example, you can take an artist and a writer, and you can have them sit down and do a comic book that would take $200 million to make as a movie. And they can do it in a month. And next month, they can do another one. So there's no way that anybody can get ahead of this form, because in a weird way, it's so easy to do. It just takes a very limited number of creatives, writer and artist, inker, colorists, which are really very much a part of comic books today, but basically the writer and the artist, to tell a story that can last, look at how long those Green Lantern, Green Arrow issues have lasted. I mean, they keep on reprinting them over and over again at more and more expensive prices. It's a little crazy, but when you get it and you read it, you treasure it. It goes in that special place on your bookshelf, and you can always take it down and read it. That is such a pleasure. I mean, I used to look at illustrations, of really good artists and in books, softcover books. And you would get an illustration at the chapter head, and then you'd basically have to read prose. It was not illustrated. It wasn't an illustrated story. Comic books, from nowhere, and helped by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and other people, have become the predominant form, graphic form, above all illustration, above all other forms that are graphic in our lifetimes. That's what's happened. Comic books are comic books. Comic books make all the best movies. They are the feeding trough of all the best television. They are the feeding trough of all computer games that are really of a quality. And the people who inhabit the world of comic books move laterally from television to movies, back to comic books, as if there were a train ride. You have writers who write movies, who write television, who write comic books. So we have gone from being a junk medium that was going, when I started, was going to go out of business in 1 year. Everybody told me that. Everybody that I spoke to, whether it was a teacher or it was a publisher or an editor, they said 1 year and we're gone. That's going to be.
That was every year. They told you that every year.
Yes, but not now. No, I'm telling you, when I say that's what they told you. I went up when I was 18 years old. My work was professional. I would hire that guy. I have sample pages. They are professional. I would hire Neal Adams at 18 years old. In fact, I worked for Johnstone and Cushing, 18 years old, which is a cut above everybody. Okay. I went to DC Comics out of high school, and I tried to get inside just to show my work. And this old guy, Bill Perry, came out and met me in the lobby, and he said, "Kid, I can't show your stuff. Don't you know that we're going to be out of business in a year?" And I said, "Well, I just like to show my work if I can. I just like to show it to an editor." He said, "It's a waste." I said, "Can I show it to you?" He said, No, it's a waste of time. You're just wasting your time. Do something else. Comic books are on their way out. Now, he didn't explain about what happened in Congress and how comic book had been attacked, because I didn't quite understand all that. He said, it's going to be gone in a year. There's not going to be comic books. Just forget it. And that wasn't just him. And they didn't send an editor to me. They sent a flunky. And he told me that Joe Simon, when I went over to Archie, I tried to get working on the fly. Joe Simon got on the phone, okay, because he didn't come. He was supposed to come in every Wednesday, but he didn't come in. And the Archie guys put me on the phone to Joe Simon, and Joe Simon said, "Kid, I saw your work. I like your samples. I would use you, but you know what? I don't want to ruin your life. Wow. Do something else. Don't waste your time." He said, "You seem like a very talented young man. I would be doing you a disservice if I hired you. You're not going to think I'm helping you now, but you will thank me later. You'll thank me later."
Thank God you didn't listen.
Huh?
Thank God you didn't listen.
Thank God I didn't listen. I turned to the Archie guys, and they saw the look on my face, and they said, "Well, maybe you want to draw Archie." I said, "I will draw anything. If you pay me, I will draw anything."
Well, and talking about
that's how I started doing Archie. In fact, just to finish off a story, which you might be interested in hearing. 10 years later, after I had been through Johnstone and Cushing and the syndicated strip and doing advertising illustration and other stuff, and I circled around back through Warner back to DC, and then I started making trouble at DC, of course, which we all know about that. It's the original art and royalties and all that stuff. Neal's making trouble. Yeah, but he's good, so we got to keep using him. Whatever it was, whatever excuse they had to keep using me, even though I was a troublemaker, I would always smile. They'd say, "Smiley's making trouble. Smiley's making trouble." One day, Joe Simon came to DC Comics. And he went to visit different people he knew. Joe Simon was the partner of Jack Kirby,
right?
And or ex-partner. He had helped to create. He and Jack had created Captain America and other characters. So he came, and so he was. People said, "Oh, Joe Simon's coming." So Joe Simon's like, I don't know, 6'7", really tall.
Yep.
And he, when he takes a corner, he like tips into the corner so he doesn't bang into the wall. Anyway, Joe Orlando, who was editor, one of the editors at that time, came down the hall and he said, Neal, Joe Simon's here. I said, wow, cool, Joe Simon. Yeah, that's great. He said he'd like to talk to you. I said, that's fine, you know, no problem. And DC Comics had a coffee room at that time. It was a really nice coffee room with Formica tables and coffee machines that would pour out coffee from a machine. It was pretty good coffee. So I went, I met him down the hall, and this big tall guy comes down, and he says, shakes hand, he says, so you're Neal Adams? I said, yeah. He says, yeah, I really got to talk to you for a minute. So he comes, we go into the coffee room, and we're sitting and talking, and I said, how can I help you? He says, well, I'm trying to regain rights to Captain America and some other things, and I don't know what to do. I mean, I don't know how to approach it. And I figured maybe I could come to you and you might give me some advice. I said, well, sure, absolutely. I said, and then I pulled out my wallet. I said, okay, these 2 cards, I gave him 2 business cards. I said, these are 2 lawyers. You want to call the 2 of them. Okay, they work different ways. And he said, oh, lawyers. I said, okay, I get you. No, they'll work for free. These 2 guys will work for free. One of them became the president of the Graphic Artists Guild. I forget what happened to the other guy. I said, they'll work for free, so you don't have to pay them any money, okay? Pro bono, it's called pro bono, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you what you're going to do, and I gave him a whole list of instructions. I said, there's one more thing you're going to do. You're going to write a bill to whoever this is. He says, well, it's timely. I said, okay. You write a bill of what you believe is owed to you from the various printings of the character. And you write this long bill, even if it takes 2 pages, and you send it in and say, you owe me this money. And it's a bill. He said, well, why would I do that? They'll just throw it away. I said, look, you don't understand, so I'm going to explain it to you. It's very simple. You know accountants? Accountants do all the book work at a company. He says, yeah. I said, well, accountants, just so you know this, accountants are born with glue on their fingers. He said, what? I said, when an accountant is born, if you want to tell if somebody's going to become an accountant, they've got glue on their fingers. They can't get it off. They've got glue on their fingers. So he kind of looks at me like I'm, nuts. I said, okay, so you don't believe me. I'll tell you what happens. So you got a boss of a company and you have the accountant. So the boss comes in and and the accountant says, here's a bill from this guy, Joe Simon, who says he created Captain America and all these other characters. And he wants to be paid. Boss says, throw it away. Now the accountant wants to throw that bill away.
But he wants to run the numbers.
He can't because he's got glue on his fingers. Because he knows that 5 years from now, the boss might come in and say, hey, you know those bills from Joe Simon? Do you still have them? And he's going to reach into a file drawer and pull them out and say, here they are. Because he never loses anything. He's an accountant. They're born with glue on their fingers. They will never they try to throw that bill away. They can't get the bill, put it in the file. So he'll never lose it. That's called a paper trail. If you want to go to court or whatever it is that you want to do with these lawyers and however you do it, you need a paper trail. You need to tell the judge and whomever, the arbitrator or the judge, that you kept on sending these bills because this is what you believe your position is. Because if you don't leave a paper trail, they don't think you're serious.
Right.
So you have to prove to them that you're serious. So you must leave a paper trail that outlines your rights. Okay? So anyway, we finished the conversation and he's ready to leave. And he gets up and he starts to walk out. And I said, and I'm looking at his back and he's a big, tall guy. And I said, Mr. Simon? He turned around. I said, do you know who I am? He says, well, yeah, you're Neal Adams. You fight for the artists and you fight for the royalties and you're Neal Adams. I said, come on over here. I want to tell you a story. I was 18 years old and I had a conversation with you on the phone.
Aren't you glad I didn't listen to you? I wouldn't be here to give you this advice if I had.
And he says, no, I didn't say that to you, did I? Oh my God, I said that to you? Yeah, I said that to you? Oh my God. It's like totally flabbergasted. Never remembered, but he believed that it was true. He believed that it was true.
Well, so I'm going to, because I can never speak enough about Green Lantern and Green Arrow. I really can't. And since you brought up the comics are the best art form, and I agree with you. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. Comics are in the three most important things in my life. I mean, it's family, friends, and comics for me.
Right.
When you tackled Green Lantern, Green Arrow, the purity of being able to tell the stories and having a partner like Denny,
right,
the purity of that. You got to, as we said, we talked about race, religion, bigotry, drugs. You never would have been able to tell that fluid of a story over a TV series, a movie, anyway, the way you wanted to tell it. It never would have been your vision.
I'll tell you the truth. I think that would make a great TV series.
I agree with you.
You know,
if they actually stuck with it, today would be the perfect time to do it. I
was interviewed by Will Eisner,
right,
one time for his own magazine, and so he did an interview, and he ran across a thing that I had done in one of our magazines, Ms. Mystic, and I did this little short story. It was like 6 pages, I think. And it was the first appearance of Ms. Mystic as a little story. And she had gone and she had there was this senator, I think, who was shooting bald eagles. So she pasted all these feathers on him, and she had these hunters shoot at him because he looked like an eagle, and it just terrified the life out of him. And then she made her little speech, and she had a few things to say. Anyway, he showed it to me, and he said, "Did you write this?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "This thing that Ms. Mystic says here, this thing about about nature and all these things." He says, "But you believe this, right?" I said, "Not necessarily." And he said, "No. But you wrote it, so you believe it." I said, "No, I don't think I have to believe it to write it. I mean, what if I'm writing a story with a communist and he has something interesting to say? I don't believe in communism, but I still write his story. I mean, I don't think I have to believe it." He says, but what you're saying here about nature and about animals and all the rest of this is significant and important. But you wrote it because it's what you believe. You're using the form to tell the story that you believe in. I said, "No, you don't understand. I don't necessarily believe it. I'm writing it because I think it needs to be said. And I think the other opinion needs to be said. So my job is to put the words into their mouths, but that's not me. I'm not saying that. I may, between you, me, and the fence post, I may believe some of these things, okay? But I'm not going to put them in my comic book. It wouldn't make any sense. I'm writing a piece of fiction of characters that I am not, okay? I have my own opinion. If I want to write an editorial, maybe I'll write an editorial, but no, I don't." He said, so he started an argument with me, and it was really great because Will Eisner was a great man, and he deserved to live to be 1,000, but and always had good things to say. But it was a really interesting discussion, and we came to an understanding. But it's also had to do with the form. So that I think at the time that Denny was writing and I was illustrating, and in some of the cases I did contributed to the writing, but mostly not. I can tell you the high spots, but we didn't necessarily have to believe in what a person said to be able to say it. We just had to know that there were people that said those things, and maybe we should listen to them because some of them make sense. So our job wasn't to try to change people's opinions. Our job was to make people aware that these opinions existed, because people didn't know. I mean, we're dealing with teenagers and kids and some young adults. So it wasn't our job to form opinions in their heads, but to expose them to these things so that they could think about them themselves and form their own opinions. So
That's missing. That's actually missing in society today.
Well,
the ability.
I think you can find it. I think that you just turn into an old fart. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? It's like you get older and you start to say things like that. Well, we've just had a whole bunch of people vote for a guy who's going to help save our economy, and it took us 4 years to get over this total cuckoo. And now we got a legislature, and hopefully a legislature and a president that's going to do the job, because people are dying. We lost 300,000 people, and around the world that many more. So we're in dire straits. So yeah, you have to believe that there are people like that out there. Look, I tweet every night. And I tell only the truth, in contrast to lies. I just tweet the truth. And every night I do it. I have to do it like, you have to do 3 or 4 tweets to really make a point. But I do it every night. And I've been doing it for the last year, since COVID started. Okay? Every single night. But there have to be people like me to say those things so that they can be exposed to people's opinions, and we can have an exchange of information and points of view and knowledge of what the truth is and how things get to be the way they are in order to move on. So there are people around. There was no perfect time. Man is not a brilliant creature. Nobody made a lot of money betting on the native intelligence of human beings, I don't think. And I think that we have to struggle through all of this stuff, and we have to relearn things. I'll give you an example. Comic books were sort of proud of the fact that we had black people in comic books when other people didn't. And so I was gonna talk to Julie Schwartz, and we were talking about, are we going to do any more with Green Lantern, Green Arrow, because we'd sort of run out of subjects to deal with. We were dealing, the latest was overpopulation, which got to be kind of silly because you could fit the population of the earth into the state of Texas. So we were kind of running dry, and we kind of knew it, okay? But I said there's a couple of things we have to deal with. We have to deal with drugs. And I brought in a cover, and that cover is the cover you see on that issue. And I was told by DC and everybody else that cover will never be printed, and I will never be paid for it. It'll never happen. Well, of course, it did happen. And that was an interesting story, but I'm not going to tell you that story. I'm going to tell you a story about John Stewart. So I go to Julie and I say, Julie, I think there ought to be another Green Lantern. He said, well, we have another Green Lantern. His name is Guy Gardner. I said, I'm sorry, Julie, I don't read the comic books. I don't know what you're talking about. So he pulled out, because Julie Schwartz had his comic books pressed into volumes with hardcover. And he next to his desk. Anyway, so he opened the book and he got the Guy Gardner, and it was this white Anglo-Saxon Protestant gym teacher in the Midwest. And he said, so this is the guy that takes over if something happens to Hal Jordan. I said, okay, so this would be my suggestion, Julie. I think what we do is we have him hit by a bus. And he said, you want to hit him with a bus? I said, yeah, I think we should hit him with a bus. He said, why do you want to hit him with a bus? I said, well, if you break his arm, he'll come back in a month and a half, but you hit him with a bus, he'll have internal injuries and all kinds of stuff. He'll just be away for a long time, so we need another Green Lantern. He says, ha, ha, ha. He says, you want a black Green Lantern, don't you? I said, Julie, am I so shallow that you can see through me like that, like a puddle in the street? He says, yes, you are. I said, okay. I said, you could do an Asian Green Lantern. You could do a black Green Lantern. I don't really care. I think there should be another Green Lantern. He said, well, what about if we do an Asian Green Lantern? I said, Julie, you don't have a really good reputation with Asians. No offense. Okay. He said, what are you talking about? I said, well, you have this guy in Green Lantern who is a good friend of Hal Jordan, and you call him Pie Face. You know that's an insult, don't you? Well, we didn't mean it as an insult. Pie Face? I could bring 100 Asians in here and ask them what they think of Pie Face for an Asian, and they'll say it's insulting. That's ridiculous. So, well, okay, you can have a black Green Lantern. I said, no, I don't want a black Green Lantern. I want a college graduate, professional man who becomes Green Lantern. Because I don't want a gangbanger who suddenly gets hit by lightning or whatever and turns into a good guy when he's been a gangbanger all that time up to there. Because I don't think black people want to be represented that way. He said, fine, I'll have Denny write. I said, well, as long as he's got an education and he's a professional man. He says, all right, fine, but you have to draw it. I said, Julie, not only do I have to draw it, as far as I know, I'm the only guy in comics that knows how to draw black people. Because even your black artists draw black people like white people. Don't even draw curly, kinky hair. Draw like little strokey hair. He says, well, okay, fine. So anyway, so Denny writes a story, right? He writes a story that you read.
Right.
One little difference. Okay, I read the first page of the script until I come to the name of the character. Name of the character is Lincoln Washington. So I go to Denny and I say, Denny, Lincoln Washington, what are you doing? He says, not me. He says, Julie said Lincoln Washington. I said, okay. So I go to Julie's room. I close the door, lock the door, because there's going to be some yelling. So I go to Julie and I say, Julie, Lincoln Washington. He says, I know lots of black guys with names like that. I said, yes, Julie, and they're all changing their names. Lincoln Washington is the worst slave name you could possibly come up with. You're going to have people marching around this building. That is so bad. It couldn't be worse. He says, well, fine, you pick a name. I said, just a name. He says, you pick a name. I said, put some names in a jar and pick a name. I said, you're the editor. He said, no, you pick a name. I said, Jon Stewart. Now, how would I know he'd become a late night comedian?
Listen, you talked about climate change in that series. You were ahead of your time.
I was ahead of my time with a lot of stuff. But the reason for that is if I wasn't a comic book artist, I'd be a scientist.
Well, I'm going to show you some art. I'm sorry?
I study a lot of science.
Well, I mean, with your art, that makes sense. It really, really does.
You're going to show me some art? I'm going to show you
some art from some creators you've worked with, yourself and creators you've worked with, because I think it's good to have a high note. This first piece of art is This first piece of art is the first piece of art I bought of yours. It's framed. It's a terrible photo, but it's from Brave and the Bold with the Flash fighting Brock, and it's just one of my favorite pages.
But Brock can hurt you.
Exactly. He can.
What do you?
I think what hurt at the time was my wallet buying this, but when I saw it, I was so in love with it. Even the whiteout on it was just adding so much coolness to it. I mean, it's the Flash, it's you. I was just in love with it. So let's move to the next piece.
Battery. It's going to die.
Oh, it's going to die. I'm just plugging in a battery in my phone. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
So we're going to move to the next piece.
Okay.
Now, this is with Sergeant Rock, and you've got Winston Churchill, and this is you're working with Robert Kanigher.
Yeah.
I always thought this was just a beautiful historic page with Winston Churchill. That's from Brave and the Bold '84.
Yeah,
and then
was that Kanigher or Bob Haney?
That was Haney. You're
That was
right.
Haney. Yeah.
That was Haney.
Kanigher couldn't structure a story that well.
Yeah.
Kanigher, I figured Kanigher out when I was 15. He would do three events. The good guy would fail at the first one, and then he would finally make it on the third one. That's his structure story. Bob Haney actually wrote great stories. In fact, a lot of people give me a lot of credit, give Denny O'Neil and me a lot of credit for doing the first modern Batman, upgrade of Batman. But in the truth, it was in Brave and Bold with Bob Haney, when I worked with Bob Haney. And that was one of the stories. It was Bruce Wayne Batman.
All right. And now we go to the next page, which is another page from the same issue. The way you drew Sergeant Rock here and Bruce in a suit, I thought was fantastic. I love even the motorcycle, everything about this. It's just beautiful page. And like I said, it was a fantastic story. And I just gravitated towards it. So, and then now was Joe Kubert editing that?
No,
Okay.
that was Bob Haney and what's his name? Murray Boltinoff was the editor.
Okay.
Murray Boltinoff had a very comfortable style of working. He was nice to everybody, and he let us do what we wanted.
Okay.
That was it.
So then the next piece, this one is interesting because this is one of the obviously Green Lantern issues, and it's just an absolutely lovely page. And I can't remember if this one's inked by Bernie Wrightson or not. I don't think it is.
Is it the Harpy story?
Yeah.
Yeah, he inked it.
Okay. And then we have another page. This is one of my favorite covers. And this cover proves that charity can hurt. So I won this cover in an auction. And then about a year ago, I was raising money for a animal rescue. So I actually put this cover in an auction to help raise money because I wanted to raise significant money for the rescue. And I have to tell you, I missed this cover so much, and it just happened to come up in the newest Heritage auction, and I won it back. I've done something I've never done. But Dick inked you so well on this.
$4, I'm assuming.
Huh?
For a few dollars more, I'm assuming.
A few dollars more, but it's back in my home. It's the Flash. It's the first Starbreaker. Matter of fact, I don't know if you know this, but Dan Jurgens, who's also a huge fan of yours, was the first creator to bring Starbreaker back since your story. So in Dick inked this, and it's beautiful. And then let's see, what else do I have?
Dan's a really sweet guy, by the way. Really.
He's a great guy. This with the black hand was also inked by Bernie Wrightson. And I just find it amazing how Bernie worked here and changed his style to complement your style. I just found it amazing. How did that come together? You're working with Bernie on this series. Because you worked with Frank Giacoia, Dick Giordano, Bernie Wrightson, and I hate to say it, but Frank Giacoia is the artist I like the least inking you. It was too heavy-handed.
Well, the only way you find out something is by making mistakes. So you really have to make that sacrifice along the way to find out how something is going to go. And every once in a while, you make a mistake, but but you've also learned something on your way. So how do you criticize that if you've already learned something? Oh, I learned what this thinking does with this. That's interesting. Just recently, I took a bunch of Gene Colan pencil pages. I blue lined them, and I have actually have them at my auction. I'll probably have them today at the auction. And I inked over Gene Colan something like 20 pages. Okay, it's the last story that he did in his life. It was a 40-page story of Captain America.
Oh, is that 601? Was that Cap 601?
Maybe. I don't remember. You're the fan. I'm the guy. So I never remember numbers, but it had a werewolf kind of Dracula character. Anyway, it was 40 pages, and I've always felt that Gene Colan was not ever inked properly, okay, because he needed to be inked by an illustrator who was used to finishing. And most of his inkers would just look at it and they'd see, well, this isn't finished, so they would just let the lines, fade off. And that's really not what it's meant to have. So I went and inked 20 pages just for the fun of it. Now I don't know what to do with them, I'm selling them at our auction. But we're trying to get Marvel to reprint the whole story, because I think it would be good with my inking on it, because you'd be looking at Gene Colan in a way you've never seen him before, more finished.
That would be awesome, especially in black and white.
Yes, and that's very cool. Very cool. So I get to do those things. So I really don't have some people have inked my stuff terribly, but the experience of having that is like you live with it, and it's like becomes part of your life. It's like Joe Orlando inked a short story about some guy that gets lost at sea, and it's called The Widow's Walk. And I'd seen his inking in the past, and I thought he would do a great job. And he had that story home at his house for 6 months until he finally brought it in, and it was a horror. It was just a horror. And I finally trapped him in the coffee room, and I said, Joe, he said, I was experimenting. I thought I could contribute something by experimenting and doing things I'd never done before. I said, you could ink like Wally Wood, like you used to do at EC Comics. You could just do anything, but this is terrible. Why did you do this? He said, Neal, I got to tell you, I would go home at night, and I would have the thing on my desk, and I would go and I'd get a drink, and I would drink it, and I would look at it, and then I'd get another drink, and I'd look at it, and I got another drink, and I went to sleep. He said, I couldn't ink it. He said, finally I inked it, but I know it's crap.
Wow.
So you find out these things. So I've got a story to tell, and it's an excuse for me having such a crappy job because he was drunk. But these kinds of things happen. You can't, you live your life, and things happen. First of all, Frank Giacoia was one of the better inkers around. Why he was? Why it wasn't Sterling on my stuff? I don't even know. I have no idea, because he's a terrific inker.
Not everybody works on everybody, I mean,
it just seemed to lose some life. It's just for whatever reason. I don't know. It's a mystery, and it's fun to do. The thing is that life's an adventure. There's always something new that's happening. Always amazing things that happen. But go ahead, do your thing.
Oh no! What I was going to say is you were going to show me something, and then we're going to end this with talking about a few things.
Well, let me show you one of the things that I do at our sales is about once a week I have a little art class where I'm not teaching people to draw like me. I'm teaching people how to solve problems, because I don't want people to draw like, I don't care if they draw like me. But there are enough people around that draw like me that it's not a significant thing. But I teach about anatomy, and I teach about things that people need to learn in order for their thinking to get better. So I teach thinking. And then I do a sketch, or I'll do a sketch during the class. And then I'll take the sketch and I'll finish it. And then we'll sell the sketch maybe the next week with the finished drawing. So although I don't have the sketch, this is the latest one. This is one we're going to put up tonight. Give you some.
Oh, nice. That's beautiful.
So people get to learn a little bit about anatomy. They get to learn the composition. They get to learn various things. And then whoever wins this will get the sketch along with it. So they get both of them, and the sketch goes free. And of course, they have to pay for this.
I think it's important to mention that fans, if you're going to Neal's Facebook page, you may not see some of his sales live if you don't catch it, but all of his presentations are archived on the Facebook page, and you can look at everything. You can watch the shows. They are so entertaining. They're just really, really down to earth, fun. Neal talks to the fans, like we said in the beginning, like fans deserve to be spoken with, and interacts with them. And there may be some items that he had in those presentations that might be still available. You can DM Marilyn and Chris for them. And if not, you can then just get a feel for the shows and catch one of the next ones, because there's always, always more beautiful art that will be created. Some of it may be similar, some of it may be fully new, but the only way to find out is by going to Neal's Facebook page.
And I get to do the thing about these one-offs is that's so great is that you're free to do anything you want with any character you want, because you're only doing one drawing. You're not reproducing it. It's not disobeying the copyright law. It's just one drawing, as if you're at a convention, only had a little extra time to do a drawing, so maybe you color it even. I'll just show you one piece that I just finished last night. See that?
That's beautiful. Stunning. Incredible.
So people get to see these things, get to purchase some of the old stuff, and they get to meet my family. My daughters are there, my wife Marilyn, who has been helping me this morning, and my two daughters, and sometimes my son Jason is there. He's the guy who runs the store, nealadamsstore.com. So if you want to get any commissions, you can go to nealadamsstore.com. Jason will take care of you. And there's a reason why he's such a good guy, and that's because he gets 10% of anything he sells. So he's what you call incentive.
That is incentive. You just did a really great story with Mark Waid on the Fantastic Four. So maybe this is a good time to wrap this up. But you've never worked on the Fantastic Four. Now, over the last decade or so, you've worked on Dead Man again and Batman again. But you also did Wolverine, the first X-Men. You're doing the Fantastic Four. What's the attraction with revisiting old friends, and what's the attraction with tackling new friends? And I'll add one other thing. You know, you were one of the first artists who, back in your beginning, you were actually writing some of your own comics in the early days. It's not like you're writing for the first time. You've been writing for 40 years. So you were ahead of everybody there.
There's things that people forget. For example, people think that Denny O'Neil wrote Superman versus Muhammad Ali. He didn't. I did.
Right.
Basically, Denny got sick at that time and had to be taken care of. And so I was stuck with the job of doing the writing on that. I wrote most of the Dead Man things that we did early on. I wrote the recent Dead Man stuff. But I've done not as much writing as art, because it takes longer to do art, and you can do writing quicker. I mean, writers in the comic book business do very well, because you could turn out a book in a weekend. 22 pages in a weekend is not a lot of work if you put in the time. So writers do very well. But I've been writing since actually when I worked at Johnstone and Cushing. I used to write all the comic books that, like, the National Guard came in and they needed a comic book, but some guy had overwritten it, so you got all these words all over everything. So it had to be edited down and turned into something that was comfortable and readable. Well, I knew how to do that from high school because I had a very good writing courses, and I was pretty creative when it came to that. So from the time I was 10 years old, I've been writing. So I write as much as I draw, except that, of course, it takes longer to draw. That's right. The only difference.
Yeah, because you got to work with Mark Waid, which is great. And I think this was the first time you worked with Paul Neary, if I'm remembering correctly.
Not Paul Neary, but the inker, Marilyn, is...
I'm sorry, Mark Farmer.
Right. It's a really terrific job, really. The thing about it was that people have been asking me for the last... It's one of those standard questions that you have in an interview. They say, well, if you got to do a character that you've never gotten to do, what character would it be? Well, the answer to that question is usually, who cares? But since I never had an answer to that, because like if you've got Neal Adams to draw something for you, essentially you're going to have him, if he wants to draw a character, why wouldn't you have him do it? I mean, he's going to do a decent job. Maybe not the best in the world, but he's certainly going to do a decent job. So generally, the publishers have been very comfortable with whatever it is they give me. They would prefer that I do a popular character like Batman because they pay me more than they pay other people because I write a better contract than other people do. So you're going to find me being paid more. But at the same time, they want me to write a book or want me to do a book that sells enough copies that it's worth it to pay me.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to put me on Booster Gold and pay me my rate because it wouldn't be worth it. So you want me to do that. Anyway, so I've really stayed away from doing too many things because I've done, I saved the X-Men from cancellation. I saved Green Lantern from cancellation. They were going to cancel Detective Comics when I jumped in with the Julie Schwartz and worked with Denny. So my job has sort of been, what is he going to save now? And so they just, that Marvel, because of a film production company, they decided to discontinue doing Fantastic Four. And I think, what was it, out of print for like 3 or 4 years, something like that?
A long time. A long time.
So they decided to bring it back, but they started to give it to a bunch of different people who had different takes on it. And I was used to, Jack Kirby, John Buscema, doing all these, one after another. So, you get this sense of not rhythm, but continuity.
Right.
Well, the new Fantastic Fours that they were bringing out, done by some good people, one didn't seem to match the other. They were all over the place. So I thought, if I did Fantastic Four, I would consult my Jack Kirby, John Buscema thing and put that together and try to do that kind of a story. So I offered to do that. We decided to do a 4-issue story. And so it's sort of reminiscent of Jack and John with a little bit of more, jazz to it, but to bring it back to what you remember about Fantastic Four. So my daughter is on the phone to Marvel, and they're saying, "Well, is there anything that Neal wants to be able to do so that we know we get some?" And my daughter says, "Yeah, he wants to do Galactus and the Silver Surfer." Because that's really the only really great, Fantastic Four story. So they said, sure. So with the cooperation of the writer, we got Fantastic Four and Galactus and the Silver Surfer and another new character. So we had a good time.
You already did the Inhumans back with Amazing Adventures. So you worked with some Fantastic Four characters, and now you tackled the main family.
Yeah, I think it added a nice breath of fresh air to. I kind of hope that other people will follow in the kind of Jack Kirby, John Buscema feel, because I think it's like a soap opera. You're trying to pretend it's superheroes, but there's more soap opera than there is superhero in Fantastic Four. And if you're going to do soap opera, you better make it interesting, because then nobody wants to read it. Soap opera can be really boring. Too many talking heads. So we avoided that, yet it was kind of a soap opera. So we had a good time.
You're delivering a good comic story, and that's the most important thing. That's all the audience wants, is a good comic story.
I figure if I have a good time, they'll have a good time.
Exactly. So I want to, thank you so much for your time. This has been fantastic, an honor, and thank you for giving me so much of your time.
Guys, please tune in to our sale and auction today on Facebook and on Instagram. Okay, and we're starting around between 4 and 5 o'clock. So you guys have to come there, share, and just let me say one thing: the more we share, guys, fans and professionals alike, the more this will grow, and the more we'll make it through COVID with a much better industry, doing new and better things all the time. And this idea of sharing, when you come on, whether somebody's doing an auction or they're doing a sale at a comic book store or they're doing what Nick is doing here, Share. Always hit that share button so that everybody else that you know gets to have the same kind of fun you're having.
Actually, tweak what you said real quick because we'll edit it because this is pre-recorded and it won't air before 4. Instead of saying watch today at 4, just throw out there and say, hey, we do this on a regular basis. Check out my Facebook page. Because I want people to watch this and come back to you every time.
Sure. But I'm trying to figure out what it is that you want me to say.
Just it's on at 4:00. It's on several times a week on your Facebook.
Okay,
nealadams.com.
Okay, so guys, we invite you wholly, and the whole Adams family invites you to come and see our sales that are on several times a week, including today and probably yesterday and tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow because of course we got New Year's. Please come and see our sales. They happen around 4:00 in the afternoon to between 4 and 6 in there, almost every day of the week. So come on, visit us and check the schedule because you'll be able to see when they come on. And also they archive those things so you can see the older ones. And there might be some things on there that you'll see that we presented last week that have not sold and you'd like to get.
Well, let me throw this out there too. As a fan, I watched the show just last week, and a few days ago from Neal's archives, he was talking about pulling the art from the folders. He did this beautiful, incredible Dracula from the Francis Ford Coppola movie, and I will tell you, I never would have known it was there. I probably never would have seen it at a comic convention. I saw it a week ago, and then a few days later, I DM'd Marilyn to see if it was still available. It was, and I was able to buy it. So regardless what day you watch this, regardless when you watch this, go to Neal's Facebook page, watch the shows. They are just so much fun, so informative. And you know what? You may be able to only afford something that's $150 or $200, or you can afford something that's $2,000. Check it out. There's going to be something for everyone to enjoy. Neal also has these blind boxes that he sells where he gives incredible value. That's a beautiful Batman right there. Support Neal because he's 100% right. Supporting the creators you love, spreading the word. Tell your fans about it. Let everybody know that this is a great place to go to just have fun. And for everybody who watched this, thank you for your time as well. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button if you like this. And actually, one last thing. When you go to Neal's Facebook page, hit the subscribe button on his Facebook page, the follow button, so that every time he does have one of his shows, Facebook will notify you. That's the beautiful thing about technology. You can sign up no matter when you watch this, whether you watch this in a day, in a week, in a month. You can go to Neal's Facebook page and you can sign up. Neal, again, thank you. Marilyn, thank you. This has been a blast.